imagine if that sort of person was able to get $100 every time they just pointed the finger at something.
Look, we understand your caveats, and these injustices, of course, can always happen. And in terms of things taking decades, though, the core point, do we have to wait for the post-colonial trauma you and others have written about to be ameliorated? And how long is that going to take?
Well, it's probably going to take a long time, and I think the thing is that we have to remember there's a lot of progress, and it's not always tangibly visible. So, for instance, things like the Koanga Reo movement, Kura Kaupapa, and all those sorts of movements have created a new generation of wholly healthy young Māori individuals. So I've been university academic for 20 years or so, and quite typically when I was a young academic, a large number of our Māori students were kind of the victims, in the sense that long histories of being unemployed, hadn't been to the dentist too many times in their life, those sorts of things, average age of 40 almost. But now in the tertiary education system, you see young people come in, they're playing sports, they're in touch with their culture, they already speak the language, and they're much more positive. And in those areas, the risk of there being child abuse or child abuse occurring is very, very low, and that's positive. The reality is, it still continues because there's still a large number of our families out there that are culturally alienated and are poor. And in those situations, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of violence, and unfortunately, it's the innocents, women, children, that suffer. And unless we keep the broader strategies going, the change is not going to happen overnight.
Bless. Thank you, Rawiri. Appreciate you coming on. That's
No
Professor
problem.
Rawiri Tanui. 2 minutes to 5. All right. Just time for a couple of opinions from you, please, if you wouldn't mind. We ran the predator-free New Zealand announcement last evening. Didn't have many details to discuss at that point, but this is making news all over the world because it's novel, it's ambitious. Do you think it will work, please?
Well, if the possums aren't getting away with it, why are the cats? I think of number 3 of Sam Hunt's Bow Wow poems, of course, and there's all sorts of stories about cats on mats, cats chasing rats, but I tell you what, there's not too many about dogs, who are also the biggest killers of Kiwis. So, look, I hope it works, and $28 million over 4 years doesn't sound that much extra, which is going to eradicate the problem, and I'd like to think that if it was only going to cost that much, we would have done it long ago, but here, there's many tracts of New Zealand, of course, that are completely, as far as access is concerned, are completely isolated, and I just don't quite see how it's possible. But all power to it. I hope it's successful.
All right, Neil.
Yeah, I think it's a deliberately ambitious target, so I don't think they actually realistically expect to meet it within the timeframes. But they're signalling a different intent, a stronger intent. And I think, one of the things that we should consider doing is bringing back the sort of bounty system, where you give someone $5 when they bring in a dead possum. And
it's always said not to work.
20
it's a bit like
20
the
cents for a flagon, you reckon, Neil?
Yeah.
20 cents for a flagon. You just put 20 cents for any dead possum you bring in.
$5 a possum, $28 million. That's
it sounds
a lot
beguiling.
of possums. Yeah.
It sounds beguiling, and there are people who swear it will work, but the official view is that it doesn't. Maggie Barry talks about the use of smart tech, luring ferrets with the sounds of their prey and checking traps using smartphone apps and so on.
Yeah, and I would think a rifle would be more effective in many cases.
You still need traps, though, don't you? I mean, there's so many of these of possums and rats and mice that rifles and bullets and all of the other pragmatic things you need to kill them are still, I presume, hugely expensive.
Well, I mean, how many possums have a smartphone to check the app to know where to go?
Very good point. That's why we have you on the panel. University of Canterbury sociologist Dr. Jarrett Gilbert reckons climate denial should be a criminal offence. A very narrow time frame for this discussion, gentlemen. What do you think?
He says that he was joking, but I think he was deadly serious, and Jarrett Gilbert's not to be trusted.
And I think he's deadly wrong as well.
All right. Neil Miller, always a pleasure to have you on, and Chris Gallivan, you too. Nice to have you.
Thanks, Jim.
Cheers. Both on the panel today. Thank you for your company, everybody, and John Campbell with Checkpoint very shortly.
Kia ora everyone, I'm John Campbell. Haere mai, welcome to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Tau te maira e hoa mai he kōrero kei te haere, he kaupapa kei te karawhiua. Tonight, Bernie Sanders endorses Hillary Clinton on the first day of the Democratic National Convention, and First Lady Michelle Obama gives a speech pundits say will be replayed and quoted and possibly plagiarised for years to come. Japan's worst mass murder in 70 years leaves 19 people dead and 45 injured in the middle of the night in a facility for the disabled. We are there. Is there really a construction boom? We look at the special housing areas announced in 2013 and we go in search of an affordable house. Plus, Building and Housing Minister Nick Smith joins us live in the studio. Remember, the unitary plan is tomorrow. The impact of countdown supermarket closures on small communities, the search for upper hut woman Mary Berrington, and heavyweight boxer Joseph Parker lines up his next fight. Busy old Checkpoint tonight. Let's begin with Katrina Batten and RNZ News.
Kia ora, good evening. The former presidential candidate Bernie Sanders has told his disappointed supporters that Hillary Clinton must become America's next president. Mr. Sanders has given a rousing speech to unite Democrats on the opening night of their convention in Philadelphia. The convention has been overshadowed by leaked emails revealing that party officials tried to sabotage Mr. Sanders' campaign against Mrs. Clinton during the primary race. But he says his supporters must focus their anger on the Republican candidate, Donald Trump.
Any objective observer will conclude that based on her ideas and her leadership, Hillary Clinton must become the next president of the United States.
The Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders. Mystery surrounds a huge surge in the price of electricity this morning. The price surge left Flick Electric with an interim bill of almost $4,000 per megawatt hour. Eric Frickberg reports.
Even the $4,000 figure was dwarfed by a peak of more than $192,000 recorded by the electricity market. Electricity sources say that could have been a computer default position stemming from a technical error near Wellington, and the money wouldn't have actually had to be paid. But even $4,000 is high compared with the $75,000 that Flick usually pays. Transpower has confirmed the technical glitch. It adds there was high demand for electricity this morning and limited supply, with minimal output from wind farms. The price spike affected only the North Island. It's being investigated by the Electricity Authority, as is a similar incident 7 weeks ago. This is Eric Frickberg.
The latest annual reports on the state of the construction industry shows building activity at record levels. The government's National Construction Pipeline report shows the value of all forms of building will rise from a record $31 billion this year to $37 billion next year. The Minister for Building and Housing, Nick Smith, says in Auckland, construction is expected to peak next year at more than 13,000 homes. 19 people are dead and 25 are wounded following Japan's worst mass killing since the Second World War. Police say a man admitted the crime after going to a police station in the small town of Sagamihara. The ABC's Frank Bonacorso reports.
A man armed with a knife went on a rampage at a centre for disabled people 40 kilometres west of Tokyo in the early hours of the morning. Most of the residents would have been asleep as he attacked. Dozens were seriously injured. The facility houses 149 residents aged between 19 and 75. Reports say the attacker once worked there. He surrendered to police 2 hours after the attack, leaving a knife in his car when he entered the station.
Frank Bonacorso reporting. The number of Chinese students gaining study visas has topped 30,000 for the first time in a decade. Immigration New Zealand approved more than 33,000 study visa applications from China in the 12 months to the end of June. The figure follows years of steady growth since a low of 22,000 in mid-2010. India has the next highest number of approvals in the 12 months to the end of June this year. A woman has admitted defrauding the Auckland International Airport of $1.8 million. The former accounts employee of 18 years, Tere Moana Kingi Angatau, appeared in the Auckland District Court today. Eva Corlett reports.
Kimi Angatau transferred funds from the airport's bank account into her own by doctoring invoices and altering client information. The Serious Fraud Office says she was able to do so without being challenged. Kimi Angatau has pleaded guilty to the 3 charges of obtaining by deception brought against her by the office. Auckland Airport says it welcomes the plea. The company dismissed Kimiangato in February this year, after noticing some unexplained financial transactions. The airport says it has now made changes to its internal processes and controls. Kimiangato will appear again at the Auckland District Court in November. I Tamaki Makaurau, ko iwa kolet tēnei.
In sport, the New Zealand heavyweight champion Joseph Parker's next opponent will be the biggest boxer he's fought in his fledgling professional career. Standing at just over 2 metres tall or 6'7", the Ukrainian Alexander Dimitrenko is nicknamed Babyface and boasts a record of 38 wins and 2 losses. Dimitrenko has a major reach advantage over Parker, and the 24-year-old expects it to be a much tougher assignment than his recent win over Solomon Haumono.
A lot of the heavyweights are pretty tall, so it'll be good to get in the ring and sort of test myself against someone who's experienced and who's taller. All to sort of bring up different challenges, reach, and also me trying to reach up all the time. I think it'll be good to get good sparring in, and then look forward to what he's going to look at his weaknesses and strengths and come up with a game plan.
Joseph Parker. The outgoing Crusaders coach Todd Blackadder has missed out on the Queensland Reds coaching job, with former Wallabies prop Nick Stiles being appointed to the role for the next 2 years. Blackadder and former England coach Stuart Lancaster have both been linked to the job. The New Zealand men's rowing four are still in limbo as they wait to find out whether they'll get a slot at the Rio Olympics. A final decision on Russian competitors is expected from rowing's world governing body, FISA, tomorrow. And the mother-in-law of 85-year-old Formula One chief Bernie Ecclestone has been kidnapped in Sao Paulo, and criminals are demanding $50 million in ransom, according to Brazilian media reports. That's the news.
The backflip.
What we were told was no one knew anything, this was never an issue, no threats were being made, nobody knew about it. 2, MFAT has been dealing with this for some months.
The dismount.
Well, we're going to be closing our doors. We're going to be dealing respectfully with the families that we've got, making sure they've got a place to go to.
The landing.
We have got to defeat Donald Trump, and we have got to elect Hillary Clinton and Tim Kaine.
It's all a balancing act. Guy Aspinall and Susie Ferguson, Morning Reports, weekdays from 6. Then on 9 to noon, police tactics and claims some undercover operations risk pressuring people into false confessions. And after 10, the documentary filmmakers shining a light on Vanuatu's Tana Island, one of the world's last tribal societies. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met Service weather to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula, fine spells with only isolated showers. Waikato and Bay of Plenty, showers clearing and fine spells increasing. Cloudy periods tomorrow with isolated showers. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, remaining showers clearing and becoming fine. Waitomo to Wellington, including the central high country and Wairarapa, mostly fine, however brief showers tomorrow morning. Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury, Otago and Southland, mostly fine, however brief rain in the west overnight and again late tomorrow. Bulla and northern Westland, early rain tomorrow and again at night, but only a few showers in between. Southern Westland and Fiordland, periods of rain, heavy and possibly thundery tonight and again late tomorrow. And the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods and a few showers. It's 5:09.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina. We begin tonight with that dramatic first night of the Democratic Convention in Philadelphia. First Lady Michelle Obama brought down the House with an emphatic endorsement of Hillary Clinton. She told a jubilant crowd, "I'm with her." Other Democratic headliners, including arch-Trump critic Elizabeth Warren, sought to make the case to disgruntled Sanders supporters that a Donald Trump presidency would be so dire, so disastrous for the US that they simply must vote for Clinton. But while Michelle Obama might have had the best lines, Bernie Sanders had the most important role. After the leaked emails and speaking to supporters still devastated by their singular sense that he is a better candidate than Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders had to give an endorsement of Clinton that contained no equivocation at all. And he did.
We need leadership in this country which will improve the lives of working families, the children, the elderly, the sick, and the poor. We need leadership which brings our people together and makes us stronger. Not leadership which insults Latinos and Mexicans, insults Muslims and women, African Americans and veterans, and seeks to divide us up. By these measures, any objective observer will conclude that based on her ideas and her leadership, Hillary Clinton must become the next President of the United States.
Before Bernie Sanders so emphatically delivered the endorsement that Hillary Clinton was hoping for and needed, First Lady Michelle Obama delivered a speech that electrified the audience at the convention. Evoking the spectre of Donald Trump, she passionately endorsed Clinton, saying this campaign was about who the country trusted with the power to, quote, influence our children in the next 4 to 8 years.
I am here tonight because in this election, there is only one person who I believe is truly qualified to be President of the United States, and that is our friend Hillary Clinton. Someone who understands that the issues a president faces are not black and white and cannot be boiled down to 140 characters. Look, because when you have the nuclear codes at your fingertips and the military in your command, you can't make snap decisions. You can't have a thin skin or a tendency to lash out. You need to be steady and measured and well-informed. We need to pour every last ounce of our passion and our strength and our love for this country into electing Hillary Clinton as President of the United States of America. So let's get to work. Thank you all.
Our correspondent at the Democratic National Convention in Philadelphia is Simon Marks. He's there, he heard Bernie Sanders, and before that he heard Michelle Obama.
Absolutely magnificent. That Michelle Obama speech, John, is going to be remembered for years to come. It was a searing and soaring moment here in the hall, far and away the strongest speech that we've heard from anyone in either party during this election campaign so far. But let me take you back to where this absolutely electrifying day in American politics began. When this first day of the Democratic Party's convention got underway a few hours ago, it seemed that there was going to be uproar on the floor of this convention because the very first mention of Hillary Clinton's name, which came when a minister was giving the invocation, saying a prayer at the start of this first day of the convention, that first mention of Hillary Clinton's name brought jeers, boos and catcalls from Bernie Sanders delegates here in the room. And for at least 90 minutes of the proceedings here, that was the theme. Every time any speaker came out onto this podium and invoked Hillary Clinton's name, the Bernie Sanders people in the room, and remember, he's got 1,849 delegates here because he performed so strongly during the primary elections. Every time Hillary Clinton's name was invoked, they were on their feet screaming, "Bernie, Bernie, Bernie." And on one occasion, Bernie Sanders delegates from the California delegation started shouting of Hillary Clinton, "Lock her up," echoing the same phrase that we heard at the Republican convention in Cleveland just a week ago. Fast forward to the final hour of this night, and the hour that was seen on primetime television here in the United States, beamed into living rooms across the country. And you had Michelle Obama, Senator Elizabeth Warren, left-leaning senator from Massachusetts, and then Bernie Sanders, a coordinated attempt by the Clinton team using those surrogates on the stage to damp down the uprising from Bernie Sanders supporters and delegates in the hall. And even as Bernie Sanders was throwing his weight firmly behind Hillary Clinton here, some of his supporters were taking issue with him. They were barracking him. Some of them here tonight told us, and protesters have been saying on the streets outside this arena, they will not vote for Hillary Clinton. They will sit this election out. And that, of course, is absolutely terrifying to the Clinton campaign team.
Simon, all of that, though, predates I think the most definitive, the singularly most important sentence that has been uttered throughout all of this time by anyone in the Democrats, and it's Bernie Sanders saying, and I quote, "Hillary Clinton must become the next president of the United States." Surely it stops there, doesn't it, with the Sanders supporters?
I'm not sure it definitely stops there with some of the diehards. I mean, there is a diehard group here called the Bernie or Bust group, and they have been absolutely resistant to numerous attempts that he's made, not just here, but over the last couple of weeks, to try and get them to rally behind Hillary Clinton. The Clinton team went to great lengths on this first day of the convention to keep reminding Bernie Sanders supporters just how far he has moved the party. They insist it now has the most left-wing party manifesto that the Democrats have ever embraced. They insist that they are serious about reforming the rules that govern primary elections here and the rules that govern the Democratic National Committee. And as you know, the head of the Democratic National Committee, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who was supposed to preside over this convention, she hasn't been seen here today because she had to resign on Sunday night and she had to remove herself from presiding over this convention. So the Clinton people are saying to the Bernie Sanders diehards, look, we've given you a lot. Now it's your turn. You've got to give back to us and you've got to swing behind Hillary Clinton. And they were substantially aided in that goal by Michelle Obama. In some ways, the most important sentence that we heard here tonight may have been when Michelle Obama came on the stage and said of Hillary Clinton, "I'm with her."
Simon Marks speaking to us from the convention. You could hear the noise in the background. After 6, we're going to talk to the Guardian's US correspondent who was also there. The worst mass murder in Japan in 70 years has left 19 people dead and 45 injured at a facility for the disabled near Tokyo. The attack happened at around 2:30 in the morning. A 26-year-old man who was also a former employee at the centre handed himself into the police shortly after the attack. New Zealander Anna Fifield is the Washington Post's Tokyo correspondent. I spoke to her outside the hospital and asked her to describe what happened.
So what we know so far is that a man broke into a care facility for the disabled at about 2:30 this morning local time. He apparently smashed a window with a hammer and then went on this awful stabbing rampage where he managed to stab 45 people in a very short space of time. So 19 people, 10 men and 9 women, ranging in age between 19 and 70 years old, were killed in this attack, and a further 26 were injured, 20 of seriously. So they're being taken to hospital now and, of course, are being treated, and the community here is in complete shock as a result.
Anna, what is this facility? Who is being cared for there?
So this is like a residential facility for people with a really wide range of mental, intellectual and physical disabilities. So some of them lived here in the centre, and then some people would come on like for daycare, outpatient kind of basis. So the people who were there, of course, were the people who lived there all the time. I'm told that the vast majority of the people who lived there were over 60 years old, and 30 of them had actually lived there for more than 30 years. So these are long-term residents, people who would be known in this community, who seem to have been attacked in their beds. What we're told is that the man broke in, he started stabbing people, the staff were alerted, and then he somehow managed to tie up a staff member, grab the person's keys and then carry on this rampage.
Reports coming in that there is a man in custody who has admitted to it. I did it, he said. He's also reportedly said it is better that disabled people disappear, and it's being reported he worked there. Are you able to confirm any of those things, Anna?
Yes, I mean, that's been widely reported here now. The man apparently was sacked in February this year and was disgruntled and basically carried out revenge in this really horrific way. So he knew the facility, he knew the people in there. He drove himself to the police station immediately after the attack and apparently turned himself in. The knife that he used was still in the car at that time. And he confessed that he had done this. He did say, as you said, he wanted to make disabled people disappear. So he's now been arrested. He was 26 years old and he's been held in custody.
Anna Fifield, who's the Washington Post's Tokyo correspondent and expat New Zealander, of course, talking to us from outside the hospital. Coming up on Checkpoint, Building and Housing Minister Nick Smith joins us live in the studio to talk about the construction boom and whether it is possible to buy an affordable home in Auckland. How have those special housing areas gone? That's after the news headlines. We'd love to hear from you in any way you choose. You can text 2101. You can email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. And of course, you can contact us on Facebook and Twitter. Tomorrow, Auckland will see the most significant announcement in local body politics since the creation of the super city. And while it sounds like an Auckland story, if the unitary plan does successfully address the crisis of rampant housing inflation, it will be a national story too. We'll look at it in depth tomorrow. But tonight we put it in context by looking at the special housing areas the government and Auckland Council announced back in 2013. The Auckland Housing Accord was, quote, a joint action to improve housing supply and affordability. So where are the affordable homes that developers in special housing areas are legally bound to provide? Over the past weeks, Checkpoint has spoken to numerous people who say they've been told they exist, but they can't find them. This report from Alex Ashton begins with a frustrated affordable house hunter.
I have emailed people, I've looked on websites, I've tried to Google developers, I've looked at company registers to try and find contact details, made phone calls, gone to Citizens Advice Bureau. Yeah, I've tried hard.
Bronwyn is in her late 30s and looking to buy her first home in Auckland. She has a maximum budget of $750,000 and wants to buy an affordable home within a special housing area. Affordable here meaning no more than 3/4 of the median Auckland house price. But despite her calls and emails, she cannot find a so-called affordable home.
Nobody seems willing to help. Nobody seems to know anything, really. And you think, the City Council, when I went to Citizens Advice Bureau, they said, I know the person to call. And they came back to me and said, the best advice they could give was to drive past the site and hope that there was some signage up with some contact details. I've done that, and I haven't found anything.
Today, Checkpoint went looking as well. We travelled to 3 different special housing area developments across Auckland. First up, West Auckland. I've come out to Kumiu today. I'm at the Huapai Triangle. When the government first announced the special housing areas, this was the biggest, and they were talking about 2,000 new homes. But I've come out here and there's no homes. There's certainly development happening. There's some builders working on the roads. There's diggers, but no homes. And when I drive to the end of Nobilo Road, 81 Nobilo Road in the Huapai Triangle, there's a sign and it's selling sections. On the list there's regular site, large site, rare site, comprehensive site, and then below that at the bottom there's comprehensive site for affordable. And I can see there's eight of them highlighted within this tranche, so 8 out of 102. I called the number on the sign to ask about those 8 affordable sections, but they're not for sale yet. On Auckland Council's website, it says 140 houses in the Huapai Triangle will be affordable. When the development was announced in August 2013, that meant below $422,000. Just under 3 years on, affordable means $615,000. In another special housing development on the site of the old quarry in Three Kings, 78 homes are being built, 8 of which must be affordable. I tried to find someone there to ask about them. So I've wandered to what looks like the site office, but I can't see anyone. No one's in the office. No phone numbers or anything. It doesn't look actually like a public office. Just a couple of porticoms on top of each other. No obvious signage and no numbers to call. Work was underway, but no one there could show me where to sign up. Finally, we went 10 minutes down the road to Onehunga, a development of 48 homes. But right now, there are still villas on the sections and people living in them. There's no sign of the 5 to 10 affordable apartments due for completion next year. House hunters like Bronwyn are frustrated because they say it's just too hard.
We've given up. We've started looking around the country for other places we might be able to move to, and we think maybe if we wait for a couple of years, then there might be some changes, whether that be that some of these developers might actually do something with the land, or whether there might be some legal changes. We're just crossing our fingers really and hoping that we're making the right decision.
For Checkpoint, ko Alex Ashton, tēnei.
Well, Leslie Harris is a spokesperson for the First Home Buyers Club. It's a business and an online service devoted to getting people into their first homes. I asked her, in the special housing areas, are there affordable homes helping to make that happen?
Okay, well, so from what we're seeing, we're not really seeing a lot of actual development, or certainly not enough or at the speed that's actually really noticeable or making an impact for first home buyers. There appears to be, a bit of a lack of transparency around SHA, land that's been bought, whether, there's potentially some land banking or on selling to developers, we're not quite sure. I think what we'd all really like to see would be some kind of maybe a governing body or something to actually administer or follow up that the use is actually being, that's being used for what the intention actually was, which is to get affordable housing into the market, especially in Auckland.
So, Leslie, a point of clarification. Were you a supporter of the idea? In other words, when it was first announced, did you guys at the First Home Buyers Club think this is good?
Yes, yep.
And
so anything to help the situation is great from our perspective.
But
I think what we feel is it's not really just enough to allocate, special housing if there's no follow-up or people being held to account for actually delivering what it's actually intended for. Because obviously the developers are getting, some benefits and et cetera, dispensations for actually, having special housing land, but we're not actually seeing the flow through. Certainly land's being held, we're not getting that flow through so that people can actually, get into the houses.
It's Leslie Harris from the First Home Buyers Club. One of the special housing areas is in the North Shore suburb of Browns Bay. Those of you who know the area will know it's a buzz with building, but not in the particular special housing area. Donald Curtin is an economist, 12 years with the Commerce Commission, formerly with a major trading bank. His blog is economicsnz.blogspot.co.nz, and he lives near the Browns Bay SHA. So how's it going?
It got designated as a special housing area in August last year, a year ago essentially, but the site had been vacant for some time before that.
And when it got designated a special housing area in August of last year, it was a vacant New World supermarket.
Absolutely. The previous supermarket operators had moved to elsewhere in Browns Bay, and the old supermarket, not a very big one, sort of medium-sized supermarket, was just sitting there and still is.
When you say still is, what's changed in the year since it was designated a special housing area?
Nothing whatsoever, which is kind of strange in that the point of the whole exercise was to accelerate the development of sites into new housing. And I passed by there at lunchtime, actually, and it is still completely empty. Nothing whatsoever has happened to it in the past year.
In the meantime, I have the sense of Browns Bay, particularly in the centre there, as being full of building activity, but they're not special housing areas, right?
Well, that's the silly thing, that it's a very popular area for quite upmarket apartments. There have been any number of sites along the same road, actually, Bute Road, any number of fancy, quite glamorous apartment blocks put up. And as I was coming home today, I passed one of them at number 23. It's 5 stories of new apartments that's going up on its own perfectly happily, unassisted by being a special housing area. So you've got the area that's supposed to be happening faster is just sitting there, and the areas that are just normal commercial are flying off the plan.
Donald Curtin, who's an economist. When the first batch of 6,000 homes in the special housing areas was announced by Nick Smith and Len Brown in October 2013, with their explicit requirement for a proportion of the completed homes to be in the more affordable range, the biggest of the developments was in Huapai, west of Kumeu, west of Auckland City. 2 years and 9 months later, there are no homes completed in that designated affordable price range in the Huapai Triangle. None. But, as a real estate agent told me, you can buy a small section for
$580,000 to $600,000.
$580,000 to $600,000. And how big is that section?
Around 420, 30 square.
And it's part of the special housing area?
Yeah, they are.
Can you sell land as part of the special housing area? I thought they'd have houses on them. You can sell land, can you?
We can sell land, yeah, still.
Okay. And do you reckon you'll get $580,000 to $600,000 for it?
Oh, easy.
Easy. And what would it cost to put a house on that?
So around say 400, 400, yeah.
So you're getting on there for about $1 million.
1.1 around there.
1.1 million for a house in Huapai, which is a pretty long way west in what was until recently semi-rural land. So, we invited Auckland's Deputy Mayor Penny Hulse on the program to discuss the special housing areas and the issues surrounding them. She didn't get back to us. Obviously, we're hoping to talk to people at length tomorrow as the unitary plan information comes out. But the Building and Housing Minister, Nick Smith, did get back to us. In fact, he will join us live in the studio here after the business news. But first, here's Katrina Batten with RNZ Headlines.
America's First Lady Michelle Obama has given an impassioned speech to unite the Democratic Party around Hillary Clinton as its presidential candidate. Speaking after rowdy protests by supporters of the defeated candidate, Senator Bernie Sanders, Mrs. Obama hailed Mrs. Clinton's service as Secretary of State, saying she never buckled under pressure. She also made it clear that she does not think Donald Trump, the Republican candidate, has the necessary skills to be president. 19 people are dead and 25 are wounded following Japan's worst mass killing since the Second World War. Police say a former employee admitted the crime after going to a police station in the small town of Sagamihara. He's reported to have said he wanted people with disabilities to disappear. The latest annual reports on the state of the construction industry shows building activity at record levels. The government's National Construction Pipeline report shows the value of all forms of building will rise from a record $31 billion this year to $37 billion next year. In Auckland, construction is expected to peak next year at more than 13,000 homes. Mystery surrounds a huge surge in the price of electricity this morning. The price surge left Flick Electric with an interim bill of almost $4,000 per megawatt hour. That was dwarfed, though, by a peak of more than $192,000 recorded by the electricity market. The number of Chinese students gaining study visas has topped 30,000 for the first time in a decade. Immigration New Zealand approved more than 33,000 study visa applications from China in the 12 months to the end of June. Community volunteers are ramping up their efforts to find missing Upper Hutt woman Mary Barrington, as today marks a week since she disappeared. On Sunday, the police suspended their ground search for the 62-year-old who has a mental illness. Today, a privately owned R44 helicopter searched bush areas along the Hutt River. Those are the headlines. I'll be back at 6 with more news, sport and weather.
Thanks, Katrina. Nick Smith joining us live in the studio here in a couple of minutes, but we turn to business news first with our business editor, Giles Beckford, who is joining us from Wellington. Hi, Giles. Auckland's housing market nightmares are now appearing in the commercial property sector, right?
Well, it sounds there's shades of it, John. There's a report out from Colliers, who are the commercial property specialists up there, and they're showing that, in fact, there's a growing shortage of decent properties for both investors and would-be tenants. It's a familiar story. A lack of supply is pushing up prices and rents are higher as well. Now, Colliers say that investors are finding it difficult to buy suitable office space at any price, and demand for rented space in Auckland is at an 8-year high, while the vacancy rate is low, as low as 6%. So the upshot seems to be that Auckland rents will rise. They're guessing perhaps 1 to 4% over the next year or two. And for the time being, it will become increasingly difficult for businesses to find suitable commercial premises. That might well lead to what we've been calling in the housing market, the halo effect. We might see businesses spreading out into Waikato and Bay of Plenty to try and find suitable properties to do business.
Yeah. Thanks, Giles. That's fascinating. What did the markets do today?
Well, the share market just a bit more subdued. It's apparently having a wee bit of a breather after the binge of the past week or two. It's down a handful of points, 73.10, 7,310 for the top 50 index. The New Zealand dollar, though, has got a bit of a shot in the arm, 70.5 US cents, and that's investors getting just a touch cautious ahead of the Federal Reserve meeting in the States over the next couple of days, and 93.7 Australian.
Giles Beckford, our business editor. Thanks so much, Giles. We appreciate it. Well, while Giles was talking, Building and Housing Minister Nick Smith quietly came into the studio. Thank you, Minister. It was very deftly done. Auckland Deputy Mayor Penny Holst did not return our calls to be interviewed today about the stuff we were looking at before the headlines, special housing areas, how they're going, supply side and dealing with the housing crisis, particularly for first-time buyers. Minister, you've got some supply figures there I know you're proud of. Is supply improving?
Yes, dramatically. So if we go back to post-GFC in Auckland, we were building 3,500 houses a year. Last figures for 2015, about 9,200. This year we're going to crack the 12,000 mark, or to be exact, 11,999. And then for the next 4 years, picking in Auckland, that independent report, over 13,000 houses per year. That's more than Auckland has ever built, and shows the degree to which we are being successful in doing the most important thing for the challenge around housing, and that's get more houses built.
Having said that, a lot of the houses, almost all the houses are expensive, right? Huapai, $1 million. It's not an answer to affordable housing, is it?
Yes it is, and let me tell you why. If you look at a market like Christchurch, where we use the special powers under the Canterbury earthquake legislation to free up a large amount of land, 25 years worth, and you've got a very competitive market, and as a consequence you can buy a really good quality home in Christchurch for $430,000, a 3-bedroom home, a good quality home, because you've got those land regulation issues sorted. Now that hasn't come about by regulation, that hasn't come about because the government has said the developer's got to produce a particular price point. It's because you've got competition working, and that's not working in Auckland. The fundamental problem in Auckland is that section prices have gone nuts. Let me give you the numbers. Go back to 1990, average price of a section was $100,000. The average price of a section in Auckland today is $450,000. That's an increase of 350%. Over the same period, CPI has moved by 71%. Price of the building has gone up by 78%. So it is true that the cost of the built house has gone up a bit, but the really dramatic problem is land. That's related to the planning issues, and here's the rub. If the section in Auckland is 450 grand, you're never going to put a basic $200,000 building on it. You're going to be putting a building that's worth $400 or $500 on it. You're up into that $1 million bracket.
Absolutely,
and so you've got to address the section price issue.
And the special housing areas was a response to that, announced by you.
Well, no, we need to go back and understand what the special housing areas is about, because it's really crucial.
Well, I've got your announcement here. 6,000 homes in the first batch. It was about increasing land supply, right? So you were extending into areas like Huapai.
No, I think it's really important. You're missing a bit. You're missing a really important bit.
I'll tell you what I'm not missing. That when you announced these, right, in 2013, the average property price in Auckland was $631,000 in 2013. It's $956,000 now. In other words, it hasn't had the impact you desired.
Well, let's go back and say whether it's been successful in growing supply. Clearly it has. It hasn't got on top of house price inflation in Auckland. Your figures are absolutely correct in that respect. But here's the rub and here's the problem. What we said with the special housing areas is that Auckland's got poor plans. They were written in the 1990s. There was huge conflict between the old Auckland Regional Council and the city and district plans. Yet you've got a really contentious argument, of which the Auckland Council's going to have to sort out this next month, and that is between people who don't want Auckland to grow out or to grow up. And what we said was, we need to have a process to give people a fair say. And there's been a lot of rub about people arguing they're not getting it. Let me finish, because it's really important.
You're talking about the unitary plan, right?
That's right.
You've meandered away from your special housing
areas. No, I have not, because the two are absolutely connected. And you need to let me finish here, John.
Okay.
Because the issue is this. The special housing areas was a fast-tracked mechanism for land zoning. It was saying, look, we can't deliver a new plan overnight. Already we've got people in up in arms that the unitary plan has been too fast. So what we need to do is to have a short-term dirty fix, the XHAs, and that mechanism we're going to use to try and do some stuff in the short term, but we always said the long-term solution was the unitary plan and the RMA changes.
I just wrote down that phrase, fast-track mechanism for land zoning.
Yes, absolutely.
So the developers get the fast-track mechanism for land owning. They get for land zoning. They get in there. They get a bit of a get-out-of-jail-free card on the RMA. They get in the
really.
case. Oh, well, they do. They get.
But here's the cultural problem, because you're looking at this all the wrong way.
Oh, well,
you're looking at all the wrong way.
I just want to look at the fact. They get in Huapai $9.9 million of council spending in terms of new infrastructure out there. That's the ratepayers paying for that. The developers get to make the profit. There's not
that's wrong. That's incorrect too.
There's not a house out there yet. There's not one house out there yet.
Oh, look, if you look over the...
And if you look, I've got this ad here from Trade Me. So this is land adjacent to the SHA, and it's being sold, and here it is on Trade Me, potential short-term land banking. And that's your problem, isn't it?
Well, but
that
here's
you
the
made
solution,
the land
John.
available, and people still want to make a profit.
But John, here's the way you're looking at it all wrong. And the way you're looking at it wrong is that it's somehow a privilege to let somebody develop land on their property. But that's the problem. The problem is that we keep putting regulation in the way of people being able to build houses. Here's the problem.
So do you want developers in Huapai subdividing and selling sections for 580,
Look, this is privately owned land. This is privately owned land,
They
John.
got onto it through an SHA.
And the way in which...
They got onto it through an SHA. They're now subdividing and selling 400 square metre sections for 580 grand.
It's private
It's
land,
outrageous,
John.
isn't it?
Well, the way to fix that problem is to ensure, as in Christchurch, that you free up sufficient land. There's genuine competition. The reason that they're able to ask for such ridiculous prices for that land is because we have not released sufficient. And if you do that in any market, now, unless you're suggesting that somehow we do a Soviet-style nationalisation of all the land, and we're not.
That's a reductio ad absurdum.
No, it's not. How do you answer this question for me, because I think you miss it. How do you force a private landowner to invest in the infrastructure and spend the tens of millions of dollars to do so?
Under the SHA,
you can't.
Under
the only way you can force it...
Why didn't you have a use it or lose it clause? In Browns Bay, for example.
We do.
In Browns Bay.
No, let's be very clear about the law.
Under the SHA, there was a New World supermarket sitting there. It's still sitting there. In the meantime,
let's be clear about the law.
That developer who got access to that land has seen the value of his land rise by 30%.
And do you
Lovely
know, John,
for some.
Hey, John, do you know that on the 19th of September, the SHA status ends?
So what will happen to that land then?
Well, then that's a question for the unitary plan. I come back to the question,
Doesn't the developer
John.
get to sell it at lovely profit?
John, I don't think you understand the supply chain of the way in which land is bought into housing. And that is, every one of those developers has a choice as to whether they use the traditional RMA process or whether they go down the special housing area status. And the question, for instance, if you take the Browns Bay example, is what is the unitary plan going to say tomorrow about what the rules are on that development?
Except all around that development, there are apartments going up that aren't part of the SHA that are being built by just private enterprise.
Exactly. And that's where the misunderstanding that you have bought into is this idea that the special housing area was anything more than fast-track zoning. That was... Auckland has not provided sufficient land for growth.
So why did you talk about affordable in here? Why was that?
Because there are. Well, let me take the very first SHA.
Okay, so how many affordable houses have been built and are being lived in SHA?
Well, I could take you to a subdivision like Weymouth, the very first SHA that I launched with Len Brown.
I was out there.
Yeah, great. And you could go there, and 164 houses have been completed to this date. Every one of those 164 is in the affordable range.
So
I'll tell you why.
164 there,
100%.
about 150 in Hobsonville.
Yeah, about that number.
So none in Huapai.
You've got
none
here's the difference.
None in Mount Eden yet. Are we even getting to 1,000? Are we even getting to 1,000 affordable homes, Minister?
Well, here's the difference. When the government owns the land, in Weymouth it was ex-Child, Youth and Family, Hobsonville was ex-Navy, then the government can determine the price point. But unless you're going to nationalise the land, actually, we do not control the price point around houses on private land, and the answer to getting affordability on private land is competition and freeing up sufficient land as we have in Christchurch, and that is exactly what we need out of the unitary plan tomorrow from Auckland.
So, what are you hoping for from the unitary plan? And have you had any kind of briefing from the council?
No, I haven't.
You haven't had any kind of sneak preview at all?
No, I haven't. And I've been absolutely religious about respecting the independence of that hearings panel.
Oh, there's been a little bit of pressure from the government, hasn't there, about the unitary plan?
Well, the hearings panel is a judicial process, and Judge Kirkpatrick has done, in my view, an outstanding job. I actually don't know what's in it. What I do have is confidence that He understands the need to resolve the question, because this is the real source of the juggernaut that has got Auckland into this housing predicament. And that is, you've got strong NIMBYism against being able to do intensification. Some people don't like that. Equally so, out the Greenfields areas, there are those that are strongly opposed to that. And what's happened for the best part of more than a decade is that we haven't allowed either. And if you do that, you enable those small number of people who do have the capacity to convert their land into houses to be able to have effectively a monopoly right and to provide for the extraordinary prices that you have rightly criticised.
Okay, so let's go back to those extraordinary prices and end on them. So if we look at an average in May 2013 of 631 and an average in May 2016 of 956, and Alex Ashton, our reporter before, had Bronwyn, who said basically she's given up on getting an affordable home in Auckland. At what stage do you believe the supply, the kind of SHA supply you've been talking about, and the unitary plan will combine to create a genuine affordable housing market in Auckland?
Yeah, well, if I take Christchurch, it took us 3 years to get supply and demand. In Christchurch in the last year, we've only had 3% increase in house prices. Actually, rents in Christchurch have gone down by 9%. So trying to predict for Auckland, I'm confident about the supply equation. The report I've produced today shows that there are going to be 2 whangareis built in Auckland over the next 6 years. The hard part is the demand side. And the biggest part of the demand we don't control, John, is in terms of the number of people that flow between New Zealand and Australia. The big change that's occurred far more quickly than I think myself and most of my cabinet colleagues would have expected.
Other immigration is a factor too, right? About 5,000 new New Zealanders a month.
I invite
most of them settling in Auckland.
Yeah, but I invite you to have a look at that very detailed report produced by Waikato University on the relationship between immigration and house prices. And what that report said was that the immigration that the government controls, the visa approvals, actually is having very little effect. The thing that's having a big effect is that we were losing 40,000 people a year for the best part of the last 20 years to Australia. That dramatically turned around over the last 2 years. That substantially has increased demand. What happens to that demand side of the factor will be part of the answer of your pertinent question, and that is, when does the supply and the demand get back into balance? My job is to drive supply as hard as possible, and that's where I'm feeling a lot more confident that we're getting it. We need a good unitary plan to finish that biz.
And we will be looking at the unitary plan in depth tomorrow on Checkpoint. Nick Smith, thank you so much for joining us in the studio.
Enjoyed the robust chat.
Yeah, thank you. So did I. Thank you, Nick Smith. Right, a local mayor says the supermarket giant Progressive Enterprises' move to close supermarkets has had a big impact on small communities with job losses and the risk of prices rising. Progressive says it will close 6 of its 184 Countdown stores, starting with Rangiora and Canterbury and Waihi and Coromandel, which has in fact already closed. Kate Newton reports.
Waihi's Countdown had its last day of business at the end of May, leaving the small town at the base of the Coromandel with just a new world to serve its 4,500 residents and the surrounding area. Progressive Enterprises says the decision was due to the state of the building, with no suitable alternative location available. But the Hauraki District Mayor, John Campbell, says he's disappointed the company didn't try harder to stay.
They're a big employer of our young people. And the other thing is really, when you've only got limited competition, or you have no competition, which would happen in this case, it does have an effect on prices.
The supermarket employed 41 people, and Progressive has said it will redeploy those workers to its stores in Katikati and Paeroa, both about 20 kilometres away. But Mr Tregeger says he fears many of those employees won't be able to take up that offer.
Let's not forget, when we talk about supermarkets, and they do incline to employ a lot of young people, they are on minimum wage. So if they were happy to recompense the cost of them travel to go from one town to the other, then maybe that is an option, but that would be interesting to have that debate with Countdown. So I'm a bit sceptical.
He says the issue is wider than just Countdown, with Waihi and other small communities feeling the effects every time a business or government department decides to close up shop.
I don't think they've realised the effect that it has on small communities, that as we start losing some of these key services and key employment, it has a flow-on effect within our community.
The director of Otago University's Retail Studies Group, John Guthrie, says it may make business sense for Progressive and its competitor Foodstuffs to close such stores, But he says the dominance of that supermarket duopoly makes them important players in small communities.
They supply a large percentage of New Zealand retail food, and I think they would have some community responsibility. Obviously, that would get to a point where it's ridiculous, but they do play a big role in the community.
Progressive Enterprises has refused to say where the 4 other closures will be, saying it's yet to negotiate with landlords about ending leases. But the chair of Retail Consulting Group, Paul Keane, says he suspects the remaining closures are more likely to be in areas where there are multiple Countdown stores. He says an example of that is in Pakuranga in Auckland, where Progressive converted its Foodtown store into a Countdown.
In that situation, you've got 2 Countdowns within an easy stone throw away, literally 100 metres. So obviously the people in Progressive from Australia are now looking at that operation and saying, well, why do we need 2? And there's a few examples around the country like that.
Again, Progressive Enterprises won't confirm whether those are the type of closures it's considering, but it says the 4 unannounced closures won't happen until the next financial year, and it will offer jobs to all existing employees at nearby stores, if they want them. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Kate Newton tēnei.
It is 10 minutes to 6. In fact, in 10 seconds it'll be 9 minutes to 6. The number of study visas granted to Chinese students has topped 30,000 for the first time in a decade. The milestone follows several years of recovery from a big fall in the mid-2000s. China now provides about 27% of New Zealand's foreign student enrolments, which are collectively worth more than $3 billion a year. Our education correspondent John Gerritsen reports.
Immigration New Zealand approved more than 33,000 study visa applications from Chinese students in the 12 months to the end of June. That's up from a low of 22,000 in mid-2010. Education New Zealand is the body charged with growing international enrolments. Its spokesperson, John Campbell, says the improvement is the result of long-term work by Education New Zealand and education providers.
For the best part of the last 10 years, really, we've been working to build it up as a good, sustainable market. So we've been focusing on the quality aspect and on the whole sort of lifestyle and appeal of New Zealand in the China market, which is going really well.
John Campbell says the growth from China is helping offset downturns in other markets this year, especially from New Zealand's other big source country, India.
We're really pleased that China is continuing to perform as strongly as it can because, as you know, there are a few adjustment issues that we're having with the India market where there's been changes to the regulations around English language requirements and some focus there which has deliberately slowed down that market a bit.
The Vice-Chancellor of Victoria University, Grant Guilford, says about 800 of the university's 3,000 foreign students are Chinese. He says Chinese enrolments have bounced back because tertiary institutions are taking better care of their students.
You're seeing there the benefits of that very high standard of pastoral care that we now offer across New Zealand's tertiary sector, where we are regaining the faith of those international markets that when they entrust their children with us, we will do a good job with their education and with their care.
The president of the Victoria University Students Association, Jonathan G., says the growing number of international students is putting a strain on student services.
It's the pressure of the fact that universities are forced to get more students because they need more funding. But it's caused an increased lack of space around the university and increased strain on services that we have here as well.
What sort of services are students saying are under pressure?
There's pressures on, say, student health and student counselling, pressures on other sort of learning support services as well.
But Victoria's Grant Guilford says the university's student services are actually benefiting from growth in both domestic and international students because it's provided more funding and economies of scale. For Checkpoint, John Gerritsen.
A private helicopter company has joined a huge community-led search for the missing Upper Hutt woman, Mary Berrington. On Sunday, the police suspended the ground search for the 62-year-old who has a mental illness and disappeared from her home last Tuesday. But that hasn't stopped friends, family, local businesses and strangers from donating whatever they can, including time, to help look for her. Adriana Weber checked in with the search effort.
Today marks a week since Mary Berrington, well known in the Upper Hutt community for her chatty and friendly nature, last spoke to her family. The search to find her has so far spanned 6 days, involved hundreds of volunteers, and included the printing, folding and delivery of 40,000 flyers across the Hutt Valley region. But volunteers today ramped up their efforts, with the helicopter pilot Mark Frickleton flying his R44 helicopter along the Hutt River to search for her. He says if it was a member of his family missing, he would hope someone else would do the same. On the ground, Robin Rust has been coordinating the handing out of flyers.
Today, the volunteers are just absolutely giving it their all. People are coming in, picking up a couple of supermarket bags full of leaflets and saying, look, I'll deliver around the streets in my area. It's absolutely phenomenal, the outpouring of support and willingness of the community to come and help look for Mary.
She says she's overwhelmed by how generous people have been.
One particular family, they've had their teenage kids out during the school holidays last week, searching and assisting. They marched all over the Hutt Valley in the weekend in the pouring rain, and they are there every single evening for searchers saying, where do you want us to go tonight?
Ms Russ says local businesses have been a huge help too, with Countdown Upper Hutt donating food and hot drinks for all the volunteers. Its manager, Barry Tormey, says the store didn't hesitate to help.
As part of the Upper Hutt community, we are really keen to help out in any effort to find Mary. She's a well-known local, and the community has really rallied up to help find her, and she is one of our customers as well.
Hutton City Taxis have also agreed to pitch in. The company manager, Paresh Hari, says all 100 of its drivers will hand out flyers to customers.
We can only feel for those concerned relatives of that person, and I don't think anyone would like to be in that position. So the more we can help, the better it is.
A Finding Mary Berrington Facebook page has also been created, with thousands of people liking it and posting messages of support, all hoping she'll be found safe soon. For Checkpoint, Adriana Webber.
A failure by a Palmerston North newspaper to print a public notice has brought into sharp focus the need for councils to be more proactive about getting information to the public. In the case of the Manawatu District Council, it has had to reissue proposed changes to its district plan after an original notice didn't make it to print. And the costly hold-up has revealed a problem on a larger scale. Our local government reporter, Michael Kropp, has compiled this report.
Newspapers have long since replaced the town crier, and by law, local authorities must publish their public notices there. But with fewer households getting a newspaper, some want public notices to be more widely distributed. When the Manawatu District Council's public notices failed to appear at the start of May, it threw its plans off by about 3 months and cost about $10,000. The council's General Manager for Community and Strategy, Brent Limmer, explains.
An ad that we are required by law to put in the paper didn't actually get published, so it meant that we had to go back and restart the whole process to ensure that we met our legislative requirements.
Mr Limmer thinks that legislation is now outmoded and is not an effective way of engaging with the public.
We also use a number of other avenues to get the information out there. So we use our website. We have a number of other elements where we bring it to people's attention through our Facebook site and other bits and pieces. But none of those, the way the law is written at the moment, can substitute for the requirement for a public notice.
Even in Wellington's Civic Square, it appears many people aren't reading the paper, let alone the classifieds or the public notices.
When's the last time that you read a public notice? Can't remember. Probably some time ago. So you don't seek them out often? Not particularly?
Probably I don't know. I don't know.
Would you know where to find them?
No. Don't think so.
I cannot remember. Seriously, I cannot remember. Do you ever seek them out on purpose? No, I don't actually follow the news that much, to be honest.
Oh, God, I wouldn't have the slightest idea.
Peter McKinley, a governance consultant, says giving public notice in the newspaper is anachronistic, harking back to another age.
I think the issue is what you're trying to achieve. At the moment, it looks like basically a tick-the-box compliance requirement. You've put it in the public notices column of the newspaper, therefore you've done what the legislation required. If the purpose is to inform your communities that there's something happening that they should be interested in, then you need different approaches.
The Department of Internal Affairs says it is working on a proposal to require councils to publish public notifications on their websites as well as in newspapers. But Mr McKinley says councils need to put them where people are going to see them. He says it's not just about Twitter and Facebook, but being where people are, and that can be as simple as having a stall at the local farmers market. In Wellington for Checkpoint, call Michael Crop there, nay.
Well, if you've been listening to Checkpoint in the last 30 minutes, you will have heard Nick Smith, the Minister, in the studio with us. He has booked a van. I'm going out on a tour with him tomorrow, so that will be on Checkpoint tomorrow night, as well as the unitary plan. It's been a busy first old hour on Checkpoint tonight, almost frantic, in fact, so let's savour the pips. Kia ora everyone, you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National, however you are joining us, on the radio of course, live streaming or on Freeview Channel 50. Thank you for being with us. In the next 30 minutes, Bernie Sanders endorses Hillary Clinton in a raucous night. Day one ends very well for the Democrats at the National Convention in Philadelphia. Will it translate out into America? First Lady Michelle Obama delivers a speech that will be quoted and plagiarised for years to come. Japan's worst mass murder in 70 years leaves 19 people dead. A honey company hopes a $20,000 reward will lead to the recovery of 1 million bees and 200 beehives stolen from Northland. And Joseph Parker eyes up his next fight. Lots ahead, but first Katrina Batten with RNZ News.
Ngā mihi nui, good evening. The suspect in a fatal stabbing spree in Japan was committed to hospital earlier this year after expressing a willingness to kill disabled people. 19 people were stabbed and killed in their sleep and at least 25 wounded at a facility for the disabled in Sagamihara. A 26-year-old former employee has turned himself in, confessing to the attack. A local official says earlier this year the suspect tried to present a letter to the Speaker of the lower house of Japan's parliament. The official says he told police he would kill many severely disabled people if the government approves such an action. The police committed him as an involuntary patient in February. He was discharged 11 days later after a doctor deemed his condition had improved. A rural mayor says Progressive isn't considering the full impact closing its supermarkets has had on small communities. Progressive has announced the closure of 6 of its 184 countdown stores, starting with Rangiora in Canterbury and Waihi in Coromandel, which shut at the end of May. Progressive says the decision is due to the state of the building, but the Hauraki District Mayor John Trigger says he's disappointed the company hasn't tried harder to stay.
They're a big employer of our young people. And the other thing is really, when you've only got limited competition, or you have no competition, which would happen in this case, it does have an effect on prices.
John Trigger says small communities feel the effects every time a business or government department decides to close up shop. Senior Democrats have spent day one of the party's convention urging supporters of Bernie Sanders to get behind Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. Senator Elizabeth Warren, First Lady Michelle Obama and Bernie Sanders himself made the case for Hillary Clinton's White House bid, but not all of Sanders' supporters were persuaded. Simon Marks reports from Philadelphia.
Even though the first night of this convention is now over, some Bernie Sanders supporters say they are not swinging behind Hillary Clinton for the presidency. These men and women are ignoring the pleas of Bernie Sanders, Michelle Obama and other first night speakers at the convention to swing behind Hillary Clinton and take on Donald Trump this November.
Simon Marks in Philadelphia. Education New Zealand says the country's lifestyle and high-quality education system are behind a recovery in Chinese student enrolments. More than 33,000 student visa applications from China were approved in the 12 months to the end of June. The milestone follows several years of recovery from a big fall in enrolments in the mid-2000s. The spokesperson for Education New Zealand, John Campbell, says the growth in Chinese numbers is the result of long-term work.
For the best part of the last 10 years, really, we've been working to build it up as a good, sustainable market. So we've been focusing on the quality aspect and on the whole sort of lifestyle and appeal of New Zealand in the China market, which is going really well.
John Campbell says the growth from China is helping offset downturns in other markets. A woman who says she was raped by a professional cricketer after a night out with him has denied she consented to sex because she was worried her friends would think she was a tease. Scott Kugelijn, who's 24, has pleaded not guilty to the rape of the 21-year-old woman in May last year. Under cross-examination in the Hamilton District Court, the woman agreed she had told police 2 weeks later that her friends would think badly of her for taking the defendant home and not having sex. But she told the court she didn't have those thoughts at the time she says she was raped. The woman says she had been physically overpowered and couldn't do anything to stop what was happening. The defence says Mr. Kugelijn had reasonable grounds to think there was consent. Community volunteers are ramping up their efforts to find the missing Upper Hutt woman Mary Barrington, as today marks a week since she disappeared. On Sunday, the police suspended their ground search for the 62-year-old who has a mental illness and was last heard from last Tuesday. The police suspended their ground search on Sunday, but a community-led search for her is continuing. Today, a private helicopter joined in and searched bush areas along the Hutt River. One volunteer, Robin Rust, says they are anxious to find her.
Today, the volunteers are just absolutely giving it their all. People are coming in, picking up a couple of supermarket bags full of leaflets and saying, look, I'll deliver around the streets in my area. It's absolutely phenomenal, the outpouring of support and willingness of the community to come and help.
Robin Rust. In sport, 2 weeks of practice and warm-up matches has the Black Caps well versed in local conditions ahead of the first test in Zimbabwe, says the Black Caps opening batsman Tom Latham. New Zealand begin the first 2 tests against Zimbabwe in Bulawayo on Thursday night. It'll be their first test in 5 months, and Latham says the training camp in South Africa and the match against Zimbabwe A have been very beneficial.
Conditions are quite low and slow compared to what we have back home, so I think that's probably been the biggest thing that we've needed to adjust to is the conditions, and it's going to be a surface that you're not going to blast the team out for not many, so it's about being patient and playing the long game.
Tom Latham. The Highlanders coach Jamie Joseph says the team's stumbling 15-9 quarter-final win over the Canberra-based ACT Brumbies was only a hiccup and not a sign they're falling away at the business end of the Super Rugby competition. The Highlanders are now in Johannesburg to play the Lions in the semi-finals. After finishing the regular season strongly, Joseph admits they struggled against the Brumbies at the weekend, but believes it's a wake-up call.
Not a lot you can do, after 8 months being on the grind a bit. So really, in 2 or 3 trainings this week, we really want to be positive about our rugby. We've been training and playing all year. We know how we want to play the game, and it's just really about going out there and playing our style of footy. That's what we're looking forward to.
Jamie Joseph. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, the odyssey of Raymond Trembath, who left New Zealand and served with the French Foreign Legion. Whether they forget a woman or not, I don't know. Yet, this week's pundit Gavin McLean presents a brief history of publishing in Aotearoa, and we have a window on the world of Shakespeare in Rio. Now is the winter of our discontent, made glorious summer by the IOC. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula fine spells with only isolated showers. Waikato and Bay of Plenty, showers clearing and fine spells increasing. Cloudy periods tomorrow with isolated showers. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, remaining showers clearing and becoming fine. Waitomo to Wellington, including the Central High Country and Wairarapa, mostly fine, however brief showers tomorrow morning. Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury, Otago and Southland, mostly fine, however brief rain in the west overnight and again late tomorrow. Bulla and Northern Westland, early rain tomorrow and again at night, but only a few showers in between. Southern Westland and Fiordland, periods of rain, heavy and possibly thundery tonight and again late tomorrow. And the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods and a few showers. It's 6:08.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina. People will be delighted, my dad will be delighted to report here that it's warmer in here.
A lot warmer.
Yeah, people are offended on your behalf that it was so cold.
Thank you. It's
Excellent.
nice of them. Yeah.
Thanks, Katrina. Back to Philadelphia now, where it's been a day and a night of passionate politics. This year's Democratic Party convention has kicked off with a string of senior figures seeking to smooth over the cracks between the Sanders and Clinton camps. It's cost the DNC chairwoman her job. She has resigned. Today the factions came together to hear their leaders, including an impassioned First Lady Michelle Obama.
So in this election, we cannot sit back and hope that everything works out for the best. We cannot afford to be tired or frustrated or cynical. No, hear me. Between now and November, we need to do what we did 8 years ago and 4 years ago. We need to knock on every door. We need to get out every vote. We need to pour every last ounce of our passion and our strength and our love for this country into electing Hillary Clinton as President of the United States of America. So let's get to work. Thank you all, and God bless.
First Lady Michelle Obama. She was followed by Senator Elizabeth Warren, one of the most outspoken critics of Republican Donald Trump.
Trump's entire campaign is just one more late-night Trump infomercial. Hand over your money, your jobs, your children's future, and the great Trump hot air machine will reveal all the answers.
Elizabeth Warren. And then, of course, came the speech that the Clinton campaign had hoped and prayed for. Her strident and popular rival for the nomination, Bernie Sanders, giving his ringing endorsement to a Clinton presidential nomination.
We need leadership which brings our people together and makes us stronger. Not leadership which insults Latinos and Mexicans, insults Muslims and women, African Americans and veterans, and seeks to divide us up. By these measures, any objective observer will conclude that based on her ideas and her leadership, Hillary Clinton must become the next President of the United States.
What golden words they must have been for Hillary Clinton. You will have heard the crowd chanting, Bernie, Bernie, Bernie. There were people at the convention, delegates, who were saying they were so annoyed, saddened, frustrated and outraged by what had happened, the treatment of Bernie, that they weren't going to support Hillary Clinton. Well, Sabrina Siddiqui is a political reporter for The Guardian. She's based in Washington, D.C. She is there, and I asked her, will Bernie Sanders' ringing endorsement of Hillary Clinton silence the Bernie or Bust brigade?
I think that the vast majority of Sanders supporters will rally behind Hillary Clinton, and polling has already shown evidence that that movement is already happening. How that's impacted by controversy over leaked emails from the DNC showing that party officials had a personal bias in favor of Clinton, we don't yet know. But the fact of the matter is that it's only about 1 in 5 Sanders supporters who say they won't vote for Hillary. And he really did just make the case tonight and say, listen, if you care about the issues that I have spent this entire primary talking about, and you understand the danger from the perspective of those issues of a Trump presidency, then you will support Secretary Clinton. Is it enough? We don't yet know, but I do think that there wasn't any more he could have done. And as you said, he did it very enthusiastically. He really, did get a great deal of applause when he said, objectively speaking, Hillary Clinton must be the next president of the United States.
Yeah, that was a hell of a sentence, wasn't it? What about Michelle Obama watching it on CNN back here? It seemed an extraordinary speech to be there, to be amongst the crowd as they took it in. How was she?
It's really difficult to even convey how powerful it was in the room. I watched the First Lady speak as well in 2012 and 2008, of course, before she was First Lady when Barack Obama was accepting the nomination. Each time it seems that she gives a speech that was more memorable and better than the last, and this might be the sort of crowning jewel of those speeches, and that's not that's a tough feat because they've all been very memorable, and the crowd just loved it. She's extraordinarily popular. among the vast majority of Americans, not just Democrats, Republicans do like her too, personally. And I think really her speaking as an African-American woman when she struck that chord and said, my two intelligent, beautiful black daughters, you know, what this has meant to them, not just having their father as the president, but also having Hillary Clinton being the potential first woman president of the United States. That was very moving. She just really had a unique ability, without even naming Donald Trump, just invoking some of what he said, of making the really human case for both Hillary Clinton and against Donald Trump. And that's a very difficult thing to do. She did it in a way that was very apolitical. And that's one of the great gifts that she has. And I think that also makes her so appealing to people, is that she doesn't seem like she's going too far and stepping right into the sort of cynicism and the partisan bickering. She does it as a mom, as a wife, as a prominent woman who's very successful in her own right. And so I think people will be remembering that for a long time to come. It really was one of the speeches for the ages.
Sabrina Siddiqui, you can find her excellent work from the convention on The Guardian's website. The worst mass murder in Japan in 70 years has left 19 people dead and 45 injured at a facility for the disabled near Tokyo. The attack happened at around 2:30 in the morning. A 26-year-old man who was also a former employee at the centre handed himself into the police shortly after the attack. This report from Julie Noach.
At least 19 people were stabbed to death in an attack on a home for disabled people just outside Tokyo early Tuesday morning. Police in Sagamihara City, about 40 kilometers southwest of Tokyo, say a former employee broke into the facility overnight and began stabbing people. Japanese government officials confirmed later the attack is not related to Islamic State. We will analyze all the information and make sure nothing like this happens again, said Japan's chief cabinet secretary. Police say the attacker, 26-year-old Satoshi Uematsu, turned himself in at a nearby police station. His motives were unclear. Residents in the normally quiet city were shocked. This is a peaceful neighborhood, one person said. I'm extremely shocked. I just want to know why this happened, another said. It's something that could happen anywhere. Local media say the facility cares for people with a wide range of disabilities and is usually locked at night.
6:16. A honey company is hoping a $20,000 reward will lead to the recovery of 200 beehives stolen from the Topuni forest in Northland a fortnight ago. The beehives containing around 1 million bees were the property of Watson and Son Limited. This afternoon I spoke with the company's CEO, Renee DeWitt, and asked him to tell me about the hives.
They are new colonies that we develop in order to use during the season. So they generally go from what we call a nuke hive into a parent hive. So the 200 that were stolen, were all at the stage of being transferred to a parent hive. So as far as a biological asset, they were at the point that they have their highest value.
Right. So we are talking here about somebody who really knew what they were after and what they were doing.
I would suggest so.
And they also, on the face of it, had the key to the lock. Is that right? The lock wasn't broken?
No, the lock wasn't broken. So the hives were taken from, obviously, the Toponi forest in Northland, and it is all behind locked gates. The gate had obviously been opened with a key, and the hives were taken, and then the gate was, of course, locked again. So there are a lot of key holders, so it's very difficult to suggest that someone could not have got a key if they had to.
Okay. And would 200 hives fit in one truck?
At a push, because as they are hives that are in the wintering state, they don't have all the super boxes on top. They have a feeder unit on top, so they're not tall as you would see hives out in the field during summer. So you can stack them on top of each other. So I would suggest that one reasonable size four-wheel drive truck could have taken all 200 or possibly two trips. We're not sure. Our hives are easy to spot. They're all light blue in colour, so they are quite distinctive. And every component on the hives will have a number stamped on it, burnt in, and that number is H3702.
So this is a very big financial loss for you guys, is it?
Extremely large, especially in light of the fact that we obviously had those hives earmarked for various locations. They were healthy and in great condition and would have certainly been ready to go in the months that follow.
And what would they have sold for each?
Look, that's a good question. Hives do have a lot of value, especially if they're attached to land resources. So to put a figure of $200,000 on the hives that were taken probably wouldn't be unreasonable.
Okay.
And that doesn't include, I guess, what you reap from those hives throughout the season.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you got more hives? Obviously you have. This is what you do, right?
That's right. We've got around 40,000.
So what are you doing to protect them, given that, in fact, it seems on the face of it pretty easy to remove them?
It is, and as you know, when you drive around the country, you'll see hives in various places, not particularly well protected. I guess it's a disadvantage of the industry. And with the more recent publicity around Manuka honey, those hives have certainly become more attractive. It's not the first time we've had hives stolen or damaged. However, nothing of this quantum.
Renee DeWitt talking about the beehives that were stolen. Lots of feedback coming in, and we'll bring you a big sample of it towards the end of the program. But by golly, if you were voting Michelle Obama would be the next President of the United States. Skiers and snowboarders are welcoming the latest snow dump brought by the recent cold snap, but it raised the risk of avalanches, particularly for those wanting to go off-piste. A small group of skiers had a narrow escape yesterday when being caught up in a big avalanche in the backcountry of the Remarkables near Queenstown. Catherine Hutton reports.
Several stormy fronts have blanketed the country's ski fields with fresh snow, prompting warnings from the Mountain Safety Council about the heightened risk of avalanches. Its head, Mike Daisley, says good snowfall in May, followed by a period of calm, warm, stable weather, has created a tricky situation.
And that formed essentially a big crust of ice up and down the country over the snow that had formed. And so every bit of snow that's fallen since then has been sitting on top of this ice crust, what's commonly referred to as dust on crust.
Skiers who stay on the trails within the ski field boundary face less of a risk. Ross Lawrence, the ski field manager at the Remarkables, says a snow safety officer is employed every season to continuously monitor the snowpack. Working with the other members of the ski patrol, they manage the risk of avalanches.
Overnight, if there's a snow build up, we're up here any time from 5 a.m. in the morning, out and about doing ski routes, going along safe routes, avalanche control routes, to throw explosives, to manage terrain. So it is kept to a minimum as far as the hazard goes within the boundaries of the ski area.
But for skiers with a hankering for fresh powder and a desire to avoid the crowds, the risk is real. Ronan Maguire is based at Mount Hutt Ski Field and writes the backcountry public advisory for the region. He's keen on people going out and enjoying the backcountry, but says they need to be prepared, including reading the country's avalanche advisory, avalanche.net.nz, talking to the ski patrol and keeping an eye on the weather.
Taking the time to learn what sort of terrain you're moving into and trying to get some skills up, potentially by doing some recreational avalanche courses to get some skills to make sort of correct decisions when you're going into the hills. And ultimately, we really want to talk to people about what equipment they should use and should have with them as they're heading out into that terrain.
Mike Daisley says the avalanche advisory had flagged the chance of an avalanche like the one that hit yesterday for about 10 days. He says the group did everything right.
They had transceivers and they were traversing the snowpack individually by themselves, one at a time. They were doing everything right, but even then you can still see now avalanches can happen even when things are going well.
Meanwhile, the news looks good for skiers and boarders, with snow forecast down to 600 metres in Queenstown in the latter part of this week, and for other ski fields around the country. For Checkpoint, call Catherine Hutton, Tēnei.
Kia ora, Catherine. Members of the Ngāti Kahungunu iwi say the Corrections Department is not doing enough to stop Māori inmates from re-offending when they're released. Representatives of the Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa iwi made submissions at a Waitangi Tribunal hearing today. Te Manu Kōrahi reporter Aaron Smale was at the hearing.
Ngāti Kahungunu Chairman Ngahiwi Tomoana says iwi are given few resources to assist those leaving prisons, but are expected to dip into their own finances to fund social programs.
What we find in all cases, bar none, is that iwi who have derived their asset base from settlement must use their dividends from their returns of investment to invest into the social sector. And so what we're trying to do here is saying, well, the Crown should invest in that social sector. There's no other company in this country that would be expected to expend its investments and dividends in the social sector.
He says the money spent in prisons could be spent far better if it was targeted at social spending outside prisons.
When the prison was being built, 1988, our chairman of the iwi, Charlie Mohi, he asked the question of the Crown, how much will it cost? The Crown said $26 million. He says, well, give Ngāti Kahungunu 13 million of that and we'll keep our people out.
Des Ratima says corrections programs shouldn't stop when inmates finish their sentence.
I think it's absolutely arrogant of any institution to think that they've done their job after somebody does a sentence of 4 or 5 or whatever years and say their job's finished and let them out onto the community.
However, he was challenged by Crown lawyer Jeff Melvin.
I do put it to you that your proposition that prisons are mere human containers just really isn't sustainable, and that there is a lot of work going on in prisons to address the needs of prisoners and rehabilitative needs.
But Des Ratima says the numbers show the programs aren't working.
If they were as intensive and as successful as the community would expect, then the recidivism and reoffending rates would be reflected in that.
The hearing is continuing for the rest of the week. For Checkpoint, ko Aaron Smaltini.
A bigger, tougher and more experienced fighter has been confirmed as Joseph Parker's next opponent as he prepares for his World Championship bout, of course. Standing in at just over 2 metres tall, that's 6'7", is Alexander Dimitrenko, a Ukrainian heavyweight with a record of 38 wins and just 2 losses. As Matt Chatterton reports, Dimitrenko will be Parker's biggest challenge yet.
Nicknamed Babyface, Alexander Dimitrenko is anything but inexperienced. A former world junior boxing champion, the 33-year-old's been fighting for almost 20 years. He'll also be Joseph Parker's biggest opponent, with a 5-inch reach advantage. After he knocked out 6'2" Solomon Hamono last week, Parker expects it to be a big step up in competition.
A lot of the heavyweights are pretty tall, so it'll be good to get in the ring and sort of test myself against someone who's experienced and who's taller, or to sort of bring up different challenges, reach, and also me trying to reach up all the time. I think it'll be good to get good sparring in, and then look forward to what he's going to look at his weaknesses and strengths and come up with a game plan.
The man who will be coming up with that game plan, Parker's trainer Kevin Barry, says Dimitrenko's big frame will require Parker to attack his body a lot more.
A guy who's 6'7" has a large body area to defend, so it's going to be very important, that Joe goes to the body in a very instrumental, calculated way in this fight.
The fight's part of the Parker camp's plan to prepare him for the IBF World title fight against British boxer Anthony Joshua. But given the Dimitrenko bout will be in early October, when exactly does that mean the fight with Joshua will happen?
All we know is that Joshua is talking to other camps at the moment. He's definitely not talking to us. I think the fact that we're making this fight on October 1, there's a pretty fair assumption that we're not fighting Joshua in November. So, we'll focus on this fight, and after this fight, there's every indication that everything going well, that we will fight another tall guy later in the year.
In other words, Joseph Parker and his team don't expect the world title fight to happen until early next year. Parker will begin his 6-week training camp in Las Vegas in a couple of weeks, but first he'll take a break with his family in Samoa. For Checkpoint, ko Matt Chatterton Tine.
The time is 27.5 minutes past 6. We're going to end with feedback tonight. This one from Graham's just come in. John, in our mid-30s, bought a house in Dunedin 3 years ago for $217,000, paid cash so we're mortgage-free. This enabled one of us to start a business and the other to embark upon a PhD. We've saved $100,000 since we bought the house, and we aren't living on the smell of an oily rag. New Zealand is Auckland-centric. Sadly, open your eyes, borrow less or nothing creates options that heavily indebted Aucklanders just won't have. There are other options, says Graham. A former colleague of ours moved to Dunedin 2 or 3 years ago and is experiencing exactly the same thing, Graham. John, I enjoy a good stoush, says this listener, while Nick Smith actually made some very good points. I don't feel we're any closer to a solution to the housing issue. Clearly, there are no short-term fixes. Jules Fox in Nelson says, hi, John, great grilling you're doing with Nick Smith. There's no such thing as affordable houses. My brother is a builder in the country here in Nelson. He's just completed a carport. The cost of compliance, etc., was more than the cost of the carport. Someone asked, are the affordable houses just a smokescreen for developers to get their plans approved? Well, some of them have taken off and they really are underway, but some of them, the developers do get consents under the SHA and nothing is happening there. In the meantime, the land is rapidly appreciating in value, and there are examples of that, yes. I want Nick Smith, says Janine, to find my single 40-year-old daughter, first home buyer with a 90k deposit, and I can only borrow 360k, a home in Auckland. Her job is only in Auckland, not on public transport. 300 new sections at Scott Point sold to Chinese investors, sections at QMU the same, says Janine. We're going to go and look at places with Nick Smith tomorrow, and we will report back on this. Finally, re-SHAs, if the government owns the land such as at Hobsonville, then why can't they tell the developers how much they can sell the land and houses for, asks Ross. Thank you for all your feedback. We will discuss this with Nick Smith when we go out and visit some of these areas with him tomorrow. Of course, the unitary plan. This is a very big announcement, the biggest thing in Auckland local body politics since the Super City merger, and that will be at length on Checkpoint tomorrow night. We'll be back at the Democratic Convention too. Thank you for being with us. Ka kite anō, and a very good evening indeed.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The suspect in an attack that left 19 disabled people dead in Japan was committed to hospital earlier this year after expressing a willingness to kill the disabled. America's First Lady, Michelle Obama, has given an impassioned speech to unite the Democratic Party around Hillary Clinton as its presidential candidate. A rural mayor says Countdown's owners aren't considering the full impact closing some of its supermarkets has on small communities. Education New Zealand says the country's lifestyle and high-quality education system are behind a recovery in Chinese student enrolments. Community volunteers are ramping up their efforts to find missing Upper Hutt woman Mary Barrington, as today marks a week since she disappeared. A mystery surrounds a huge surge in the price of electricity this morning. Our next news and weather is at 7.
His favoured politician in the world.